Hi, this is Quinn with SF Indie Fest, and I'm really excited to be here with the filmmakers of Bound. I'll let you all introduce yourselves. Isaac, you can kick it off.
My name's Isaac Kurotu Woofter. I'm the writer, director, producer of Bound.
Thanks, Bryant.
I'm Brian Carroll. I play Gordy in Bound.
And Christian.
I'm Christian O'Turn. I'm the editor of Bound.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for being here today and for sharing the film with the San Francisco audience. So, Isaac, I'll start with you with a kind of big picture kind of question, but what kind of got you interested in exploring these themes of trauma and how did this film come about?
So it really started with that project before this, actually, that we got off the ground and it got into the hands of some big studios and right before COVID. And then during that time, it was like I wrote it for myself. It was like my Rocky, let's call it. But the studio was like, "You're Isaac Kurotu Woofter. You're not Matt Damon. We're not going to do a film for this amount of money." And they're like, "But we'll do it for this amount." And they were gonna strip it and take my screenplay credit away and all that, and have their writers work on it. And I was like, "No." And then I went home and I was like, "Oh, I'm stupid. Just let them do it." But by that time, COVID hit. And during COVID, I just didn't know how long we would be quarantining for. And I thought, well, I don't think I can raise the amount of money I wanted to do that we needed for the other film, but I do think I can raise the amount of money for a smaller film. So I wrote Bound, and it was very loosely inspired by my girlfriend at the time, who actually plays the lead. We're not together now, but at the she was the one that got the other film into the hands of the big studio. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna write something, and as a thank you, I'm gonna make you the lead. And it was loosely based off a conversation we had about childhood trauma and I said, "Hey, I want to write a film about a girl that comes to New York City, and leaves a broken home, and uh, and see and use that backdrop of the gritty city and the diverse people here, to yeah, that was the inspiration of it, with some darker themes of trauma and some mental health issues, but with a thread of hope, I would say, throughout. So that's what started it.
And Bryant, can you tell me about how you came to the film and seeing the script and what you were thinking about for your character?
Yeah, sure. I submitted for the film. Actually, my agent, I think, submitted for the film, and I put myself on tape. When I got the sides, I was like, "Holy shit, this is juicy." It was just it was an actor's dream because Gordy has so much going on, and there's so much um, uh, just meat there, So I gave it my best shot, and I sent it off, and I thought, I was like, well, we'll see what happens. And then I got the call from my agent that Isaac wanted to meet with me over Zoom, and so we met and we had a conversation, and he had me read for another role as well, and I was like, when he had me do that, I was like, oh man, are you kidding me? Like that's just not what I'm feeling. but but then he was like, yeah, we're gonna give you Gordy. So
I want to piggyback off that. So when I was writing the screenplay, my second or third pass, I said, "All right, I'm gonna do a pass on this character, Gordy." What I didn't want it was a kid was like just a kind of a one-dimensional, angry stepfather, kind of white trash kind of guy. And so I took a pass on that, and I really worked on the actual side of Gordy that's really loving. And it really, in some ways, he's the most pure and honest character in the film. Um, and I was and I had this idea to play Gordy, and I grew out this giant beard, And I said, Justin, and I was all ready set to cast myself essentially. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna audition some people just in case. I don't know what will happen. And Brian came along. I saw hundreds of people, more than that even submitted, but I only got to see, I don't know, 50 or 60 or 70 people at least on their tape. And Brian was the only person that saw that other soft quality side and the vulnerable side of Gordy, which was that he really does care. He just lacked the capability and the capacity to actually deliver on what he wants to do. He couldn't do it because of his type of trauma that he dealt with. I did have Bryant read for the part just in case, and then I was like, nah, man, this guy's too good. And I cried during the audition, and part of it was because I finally saw that character who I thought was so complex really come to life and saw all of the sides of it, not just this angry guy. And I think I also cried because I realized I was going to give up that part.
Mhm.
And so I did on the Zoom, and yeah, and it was the best decision. I had enough going on writing and directing and producing it. So and Bryant delivers a tour de force performance.
Thank you.
Christian, I was curious about this film has, you know, a really dynamic kind of use of tension, and you know there's moments of tension and there's moments of release. And so I guess two questions I had is like, how much did the kind of structure kind of adhere to the original script versus how much you guys were kind of playing around with things? And then how were you kind of thinking about building tension within these individual scenes?
Well, a lot of it was in the script, for sure. I mean, when I read it and when I started watching the dailies, I immediately knew that this was going to be a very intense movie, not just because of the subject matter, but it was also written in a way that there's a lot of jumping around in locations. The way it's shot has this very kind of like erratic handheld style throughout the movie. So I kind of immediately knew that with the editing, it needed to kind of heighten that as well. Um, but yes, it definitely changed throughout the process. You know, like I think like any movie, there's deviations from the script. I think Isaac just really wanted to, you know, um, establish like a very fast-paced rhythm very early on, and if that meant, you know, getting rid of scenes or really altering the structure of the story, we were very open and willing to do that. There was no sort of like marriage to like staying intact with the script.
And Isaac, can you kind of speak to how much I was curious when I was seeing this the dynamic between the friendships that were forming, you know, as she was getting her footing in the city. I was curious if any of the kind of basis of these kind of friendships and these relationships stem at all from any kind of personal autobiographical experiences with different people in your life. Maybe it's a vibe, but how did you kind of invent these characters and how did you want them to kind of relate to each other?
Well, the characters, I knew I wanted to use somebody kind of, I wanted a black character, a Latin character. I wanted gay character. I wanted to basically cover what we are in New York, and diversity and inclusivity is generally a very huge theme in most of my screenwriting. I'm very fascinated by this like this idea of found family and how like friends or the family you get to choose. And so I wanted to play with that as well. And and all of the characters are tied to the central theme of the film, the understanding nature and being bound by something. And the characters that kind of become like the mother figure, the father figure, the best friend figure, they've all gone or are going through similar situations where they feel like they are bound by something. Um, and so that was important. And then the older characters, I saw them as having kind of they see this young girl and they see this part of that girl in them, in the sense that they're like, oh, that girl's struggling. I remember when I struggled like that 5 or 10 or 20 years ago, and I was like that. I wanted to do it on my own. I didn't want help. But I needed help. And so each one has gone through their own version of that. Some are still kind of going through that. I would say Standrick is still kind of going through that, her best friend character, but the older characters have, and that's why they wanted to help. Um, I don't think I've been helped by lots of people in my life, but I don't, it's not like I was like, oh, one day somebody came in and said, oh, you need a job, you need this, or you need this. So there's nothing that's exactly parallels the situations that happen. But the idea of helping somebody that is in need, I've definitely gone through that, been helped, and also helped others. So.
Um, Brian, can you kind of speak to whether, did you see your perspective on your character change and evolve as you went through the production of the film? Was there an evolution in your kind of approach, or was it really fixed from the beginning and kind of got prosecuted exactly the way you had in mind?
Yeah, I think it elevated as we went through filming. I mean, I came in pretty prepared with my ideas, and then once we started filming, um, Isaac and I would have conversations off to the side about what was happening in the scene, what Gordy, how each scene changed for Gordy, um, and and the intensity of of his mental state in each different scene. So yeah, it definitely evolved through the course of filming, and I think all in all, Isaac and I we we melded what we both wanted, and I think it turned out pretty damn good. So
Yeah.
I mean, I
Um,
think it's the actor's job to come in with ideas that were inspired by the script, take those ideas, and hopefully I get inspired by whatever they bring. And I think it's my job to just watch it from the outside and know that sometimes the actors might be feeling something and really want to go that way. And I want to give them that space to play in that. But I also have to remember, an actor like Bryant who's really gets it and really gets involved, and you can see all the cells of his being going. And so I know that there were times when he was feeling this, and I would just be like, hey, Bryant, like, it's what you're doing is great, but we do need to see this other little side or this, and otherwise, just for the whole picture. We don't want to just go one note. We want to show them 5 notes, or we want to show them 5 notes 100% every way, and it's going to feel maybe sometimes artificial. Like, well, if you're riled up and all of a sudden I'm asking Brian, hey, we need a softer boat. He doesn't want to, might not want to feel that, but I'm like, we worked with that to make sure that we got what we wanted, essentially, and that also worked for the picture. And I think, I work with Brian any day.
say
But we developed that trust partway through it, as every day went by, we could feel like, there was less pushback or pull from either side, as more and more trust, grew.
Kristen, can you kind of speak to what kind of films you're thinking about when you're editing something like Bound? Do you have films that you go to for inspiration, or was there a tone or something that you and Isaac maybe used as a kind of reference point?
I'm trying to think of a specific movie. I mean, Isaac and I spoke about a lot of different movies and just movies we like in general, but I'm having
What are
trouble
some of the
thinking of
films
like
that
a
you guys?
specific one. I think in terms of like tone and style, we just talked about like this idea that, you know, if you establish a rhythm of intensity and when you break it, you know, that's, you need to be very strategic about that, because then that's, you know, that's going to be more impactful for the audience. So in this case, the movie's very fast paced and very kind of erratic right from the get go. So then when all of a sudden you stop and you're going, okay, now the camera's not moving, now we're not cutting, you know, you feel something from that, breaking that pattern. So that's something we were always very conscious of. And specifically to what Isaac and Bryant were just talking about, with the character, like one of the things that we worked on the most was how we were very, very conscious about how the character of Gordy was going to be sort of interpreted and perceived by the audience. And we were constantly tweaking, like, is he too intense here? Is he too soft here? You know, his character is so interesting because he's such a scary guy, but then he's also such a broken and kind of, you feel sorry for him just as much as and so it's like, I remember earlier cuts where we would show it to a small group of people and ask them questions, and one of the things we would get is, oh, I hated that guy, I'm so, you know, I'm so glad it ended the way it did, I don't want to give
It was
it away.
usually all the females, and we're
Right.
like, okay.
And we just went back and we're like, well, we don't want that to be the perception of the character. And so we went back, and it's interesting how just tiny little tweaks and adjustments can completely alter the way people perceive a character. And then we would go back and do another screening of the movie, and people were like, yeah, you know, I really felt sorry for that guy. So it's very it just goes to show how slight adjustments in a performance, and that's all credit to what the range that Bryant gave us to be able to work with that material and be able to craft that.
Absolutely. So Isaac, one of the things this film brings to the table is squirrel work. It needs to be discussed. So where did you find the squirrel? What was it?
We bought the squirrel.
Were they difficult to work with? And things were in the contract there.
So yes and no. The squirrel is a sugar glider, a flying squirrel, a pocket squirrel. The first live flying squirrel, I think, that has been used in a film, by the way. There's been animated squirrels and stuff, but not actual. Funny you say that, because when I sent it to producer and we were talking about it early before we even started, and they're like, so obviously you're going to CGI the squirrel so you can get it to do what you want to do. And I was like, no, I'm gonna buy a squirrel. And so I bought a squirrel off Craigslist. They're actually
Really?
legal to own in New York City, by the way. It's not that here now, and I gave it to the actress, and I said, like 3 months before, and I'm like, get comfy. You guys have got to have to bond. So I gave him 3 months to bond with this squirrel. The squirrel's nocturnal, and so it just sleeps all day. So a lot of times when I was directing on set, the squirrel, it's a marsupial, they like pockets. So they was just in my hoodie, and I'd be directing, and the squirrel would be in my hoodie all day. I was always terrified that this squirrel was going to, in one of the outdoor scenes, which we have a lot, was going to just, jump off and, like, become a real live squirrel. And it sometimes it did, and it always jumped back on to the actress. And we shot 98% of the scenes, and on the very last day, the squirrel jumps off at a night scene, starts climbing this tree, and I'm like, it's fine, guys. The other 8 times it's done this, it hops right back off. It just keeps going, keeps going. Next thing you know, it's 30 feet into the air. And my first thought was, well, I'm so glad we got like 98% of the shots already, because that squirrel is going to be a lunch for a hawk tomorrow for sure. And everybody, the whole crew was freaking out. I had a DP in the water because I wanted these water shots. He was in fishing waders, and he's like passing off his camera, which was the worst thing. We should have kept rolling, because I would have put that in somehow. But he passes off his camera in case it falls into the river. Next thing you know, the thing falls. Everyone's freaking out. And I'm the only one that's like, it's going to be fine, guys. It has a built-in parachute. And it just goes, and it's like, and it just floats down. It's easy to work with. The only issue with that squirrel is that it's got claws. So
Yeah.
like you can't just like kind of let it crawl on you unless you have like a thick sweatshirt on. So there are a few times where it was crawling on the actress, and pretty soon she's like, I can't do another take. And I'm like, why? And I look at her, it looked like her arms have been bitten by like fire ants or something from the little
Right.
claws. But other than that, it was a treat.
That is amazing. Yeah, I had no idea that it played so heavily into the film, much more of the film than one might anticipate.
Yeah, and I was just like, we're gonna roll a camera and then we're gonna use what we get. And I'm not
Yeah.
asking it to do cartwheels or something like that.
And
So
there was all these little moments where, it would just come out at the right time when the camera's turning and like crawl up here, and we're like,
Yeah.
that's going in the cut because that's
Yeah,
such a
yeah.
perfect moment that you
Yeah.
can't even
yeah,
plan
we
that.
don't we sometimes we were like, doesn't matter what the actor's doing right there anyways. It could be terrible. People are just gonna look at this cute little squirrel at this moment. So yeah.
So Isaac, maybe you can speak to as we wrap up here. How can people help get the word out about the film? What's next for the film, and then what's next for you?
Sure. First, we are going to play festivals for a few more months, and then late spring, early summer, we're going to probably have a small theatrical release and definitely falling on streamers at the same time. At that point, that's when we really need our help. People, buy the film, watch the film, pre-sales if possible. You can follow the Bound IG page, Bound the movie. You can also go to the website, boundthemovie.com. So those are a few ways that you can do that. If you're, if you're on IMDb, you can go and you can rate it on IMDb once you see it, and eventually you'll be able to rate it on any of the platforms. That kind of stuff always helps as well. So that'll be the big push, and then spread the word. Because the work of the actors and the work of what Christian's done is it really does need to be seen, and if yeah, I mean that's the biggest thing, word of mouth. That's why we're playing the festivals. What's next? Got to finish this off first before I really push. I do have other projects ready to go, and we're starting to collect some money for some of those projects, some shorts, but also some features. Yeah. You can follow me as well. I'm just Isaac Woofter on IG. So, and all of these guys, except for Christian, he's the only one you can't find on any of the social medias.
Right. Well, Christian, Bryant, and Isaac, thank you so much for sharing your film with San Francisco. And look forward to seeing what's more to come from y'all.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you very
Great,
much.
great to chat.
Have a good one.
You too.